And you have to watch Corey because he's actually recording while we're doing this, and this becomes part of the episode.
We're live and ready when y'all are.
Thank you, Corey. So here we are back at West China Tea with Emma and Sohan. Sohan, are we continuing with the same oolong tea?
You know, I was going to go back to the pu'er because we only did one steeping in that, but I want to know what are we doing next whiskey-wise,
Yeah.
so then I can have a precognition and not get off on the wrong foot.
We're going to be trying Pilgrimage.
Texas single malt.
Yeah, so this is another single malt. I only brought single malts for you guys.
It's
what I
okay.
prefer to drink. And so Pilgrimage is a release that we do. It's always going to be very small, kind of experimental things we're testing out, and it'll always be a distillery-only release. And so the idea is you have to make your pilgrimage to the distillery to get your bottle and try it.
Love that.
Everyone loves a
Except
good
for
pun.
us. We get to
Except for
sit
y'all.
right here and you bring it to us. So
Yes.
yes.
This one in particular, I really love kind of the story it tells of the connection between all of the processes in the whiskey making process, but also the equipment and just how every little thing you do will impact the next stage of the process. And so for this one, we took our unpeated single malt and we ran it right after we distilled our peated single malt. And so it's the same barley type. It's all the Golden Promise Scottish barley. And this whiskey, the grain was not peat smoked. It is completely unpeated. It's just that right before we ran these distillations, we had run our peated distillations, and all of those oils and that phenolic character just lingers in the still and stays in the still. And so it's picking up this kind of smoky phenolic character, and it stayed through maturation. So when they filled the barrels, they'll track like, okay, this is one distillation after peat. This is 2 distillations after peat, all the way up to 4. And through 4 distillations, you can still get that character. And it just completely, it's just like this magical showing of how what you ran in the stills before you did your distillation, that matters. Even something as like something small like that make such a huge impact through maturation.
How long does it take to clean those stills? Because I saw them, and they are huge-mongous.
They are very big. So our spirit stills, we just do a rinse with water. We don't do like an intense heavy clean on it. We're just kind of like getting the main like oils off and doing a rinse. The wash stills are a bit more intensive. We have reboilers that like we have to cycle through clean cycles, like again rinsing with water. That process takes a little while.
It seems that Sohan is inspired by your story.
I am, yes. Well, I do want to smell if I can first.
Yes. So this one is, it is not cask strength, but we did leave it very high. So it's 65% ABV, and it does really wonderfully with some water.
Okay,
so if you want to prove it down a little as well.
Yeah, I'll get a little Gongda Bay full of some cold water, room temperature.
Room temperature
water for us, and I'll grab the tea. But I'm going to smell this first to make sure that my intuition is not leading me astray.
Mm-hmm. It is bright. The alcohol percentage on this is going to be in the 120 range. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So very high proof.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to do what I thought I was going to do. I'm going to do a tea that is smoky but not smoked. So has a kind of an incidental smoke character to it. And at least the story will pair, and people watching this can't tell anyway, so. So it's a win.
Unless you tell them.
Yeah, exactly. But we're not going to do that. We're obviously going to act like it's a great pairing. We call this smoke bomb, and it mostly because it looks like a smoke bomb, like the firecracker. Mm-hmm. But also because it's a sheng pu'er, so this is the green kind of pu'er. So remember I was
Okay.
saying that this one we started with, that dark, earthy shu pu'er is intentionally fermented, whereas the original style would have been incidentally fermented. It was a green tea that would have just fermented naturally over time. This I'm pretty sure is from 2021. These guys, doesn't say. I'll ask him. 2021, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. And so it's not as old as that cloudburst that we were drinking, which is from 2009. And it still has a lot of the sheng pu'er taste. And inside the ball, there is this smokiness. And the reason for that is because this is a subcategory of pu'er called Gushu cha, ancient tree tea. And it means that the trees that it was sourced from are old, just like you have like old agaves, and old vines. So the trees that comes from are old, and it's from a particular little patch called the Bama patch, which is just the name of a location on Nan'uo Mountain, and the tea from there is famous. And they used to have lots of ancient trees there, and they cut a lot of them down, most of them down, for firewood during like the 80s and 90s when there wasn't a market for expensive ancient tree tea. And so we've been getting tea from this Bama patch, which is famous for having good tea, but not ancient tree tea. Just younger trees, the next, younger generations of tea trees. And he finally got access to some of this ancient tree material from the Bama patch. And so it's our first time getting ancient tree Bama tea. We've got ancient tree tea from other parts of the mountain, but this is the first time we got from Bama. And the Bama ancient trees are few in number, so it's hard to get access to the ancient trees from there. So instead of making it into a big old cake, which would be like a $500 cake, he made it these little balls, so it's like a $7 ball. And that's much more palatable for people who want to try this kind of tea. And the reason that it's smoky is because rather than processing it in a machine that sha-qings it, fixes it, which is what you do with teas, you cook it. Traditionally, you'd cook it in a wok. Nowadays, the larger process is, the faster, more efficient process is to use a tumbler, like a machine that tumbles the tea and cooks it, and it's tumbling it around. It's not spending very much time in contact with the hot surface, but it gets an even amount of time on that. So it's like stir frying. It's emulating this process, which is what they would have traditionally done. But because this is such a small batch of tea that he was drawing from, he's still doing this in the traditional way. And he's still hand cooking this tea because it's too small of a batch to put in one of these machines. And so when you're doing that, you've got this stove that you've got the wok here, and there's a fire underneath it, and it looks like kind of like a big pinball machine sort of shape. It's like a table with a thing here, and that wall is behind the wok, and then you go behind that, and there's a little place to put the wood in, so that you're putting the wood under the wok from behind this console, from behind the stove, so it's not burning the person's legs. So there's someone in the back feeding the wood in and fanning the fire, and then the guy or person cooking the tea, processing the tea master, is on the other side with the wok, and they're fluffing the tea, they're rolling it between their hands and everything. And the smoke from that fire gets in the tea.
Okay.
Just incidentally. They're not smoking it, but it's just right behind there. So when it's windy, it whips around and the smoke's there, and you can smell the smoke in sheng pu'er because of that. So, but it doesn't, the outside, because it's not smoked, so it's not very deep in the leaf, the outside of the tea loses that smoke smell. And the inside is where that's preserved because it's a little Dragon Ball shape. So I'm gonna let you smell it now that it's been rinsed. Give your little cups a wee rinse as well.
And again, there's similarities with barley and drying the barley and how you dry the barley and whether there's live fire or not.
Right.
This smell reminds me of something, and I'm having a really hard time placing it. This is going to sound very weird, but the first thing that came to mind was like okra. And I think just because it's that like kind of soft green vegetal note, and it doesn't seem quite like the right word, but that's where my
asparagus,
you were saying earlier about like the similarities. I think we've talked about a lot of the similarities between tea and whiskey. I think one of the big differences that the growing your skill and knowledge and experience in tea doesn't necessarily involve growing your vocabulary around the tastes of tea and the smells of tea,
Yeah.
or your ability to articulate or to identify them. That's much less part of the culture than it is for whiskey, wine, coffee, beer.
Yeah.
A lot of these Western food cultures and cultures of cigars and the culture of connoisseurship, it's much more about the experience. So like it reminding you of okra is different than it smelling like okra.
Yes.
Right? There's probably more emotional association with okra than there is just as a tasting note. I don't know what your relationship with okra is. Did you eat okra ever growing up?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Either fried okra or in gumbo.
Oh, where are you from?
Yes.
I grew up in Texas.
Okay, cool. I was born in New Orleans, so I've got roots, but I know they make gumbo in Texas too, because
North
gumbo
Houston.
in Huntsville. Oh yeah.
Yeah, North Houston area.
Oh cool, I'm from Houston.
Oh nice, like Spring, Conroe, Woodlands
Okay,
area.
cool. I'm from like Sharpstown, Chinatown,
Yeah,
Southwest.
nice.
Yeah.
My sister is still in Richmond, so kind of like
Okay.
west
Yeah,
area.
not too far.
Yeah.
Getting closer every day.
Yes, that is accurate.
Katie's basically Houston now.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I lived in Katy for a little while.
It's
Yeah.
stressful driving.
Yep. It's only how many lanes? It's like the feeder road has 10 lanes.
Yeah, I know. So you can taste this, but this is the rinse. So go ahead and taste it if you'd like, and you're welcome to. And you can even drink the whole thing, but you can also give the rest to your tea pet there, Chanchu. Yeah. I had some sixth graders the other day, and they called them tea monsters.
That sounds like so much more fun.
Yeah,
Tea
they
monsters.
each two of these four kids ended up buying tea pets. And one kid was like, I'm going to put it next to me, and when I play Fortnite, every time I get a kill, I'm going to pour hot water on it.
Okay.
It was great. It was great.
So I definitely want to go back to what you were talking about. So when you guys do these, is it a ceremony? Do you call this a ceremony, or is it more of a communal, just like an experience?
We don't have a word in English for exactly what it is.
Okay.
The practice, the kind of the discipline is gong fu cha. And the activity you could also say is gong fu cha. And there's not a lot of consensus or precision to those terms, right?
Okay.
They're very loose terms. You could say in general, you can call all tea arts in general, even England and Morocco, like cha dao, way of tea.
Okay.
Ways of tea. There's many of them. It doesn't mean any one particular thing. Or chai means tea art. Some people would say this is chai, but other people would say no, chai is this very formal style that does look more like a ceremony, but it's a
Okay.
modern thing. Traditionally, it's a skill, it's a discipline, it's something that you do to enjoy tea. And the purpose is to enjoy tea. And the thing is, unlike whiskey, if I go buy a bottle of whiskey and I can pour that bottle of whiskey and drink it, and there's not really any way I can mess up that process. I can't ruin the whiskey by the way I pour it, right?
Accurate.
But you can ruin a tea by the way you pour it, and also you can pour a tea really, really well. It's not like you go to a restaurant and you're worried that the waiter who's pouring your wine is going to like screw it up somehow and it's just not going to be good. You know, the wine is pretty much done. And so I think if you want to imagine, you've been talking with like all of this like technical knowledge and precision and really seriously, and I recognize that because we work with people who are deep in craft.
Yeah.
And the level on which you're communicating is like someone who's deep in craft. And those processes have been developed to this utmost degree because they have such a profound impact on the whiskey. And then imagine if there was an extra step that had equally profound impact, and the person had to do that at home, how developed that skill set would be, how many magazines about that there would be, how many special tools.
Yeah.
Just like pour over coffee, and how,
Yeah.
how people get into that, and espresso and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, you can think of this as that. And I would say that there is this more subjective, abstract, some would say like spiritual component by virtue of it, being really, really, really old, and something that's been connected with Buddhism, with Taoism throughout Chinese history, and the fact that the emphasis is less on the straight five senses experience of the tea and more on something else, the chi of the tea, the way that it feels. Is people always ask me, what's your favorite tea? And I'll be like, oh, it's this tea. Maybe I'll say specific. I'll just say the category of tea. And those people say, well, what makes it your favorite? And I'll say, I like it the best. That's what makes it my favorite.
Yeah.
I might not have a reason. It's not a particular note. Because it's going to be different every time.
Yeah.
Like we talked about, it's going to be different every single time.
Yeah.
It's the personality, the chi of that tea that makes it good or not good to me, ultimately subjective.
Yeah.
But you can feel the effect of things like tree age, altitude, processing degree, processing style, whether there was smoke involved, how it was stored, how it was aged. Those are all going to come to bear on the tea, and the person pouring the tea, the way they pour it is going to come to bear. And so really you can think of this process as the continuing development of that art and skill as an individual's personal practice. Everyone pours tea differently. And the social context that it generates. And that's what, you were here, so you know what it's like sitting up here where everyone's sitting around the table drinking tea together and there's strangers there and having conversations, very vulnerable, intimate conversations a lot of the time with people that they don't actually know.
Yeah.
But, it really vibes well with Austin because I feel like that's an important part of Austin's culture, Texas culture. They call us the friendly state, and I think that's something that's cool about Texas that I miss when I travel to other parts of the country is how open and friendly people, having conversations at the grocery store with people you don't know. And it's really nice to be able to hold space for that. And that really is for me, is what's really special about this. Ceremony, for me, feels like it puts it up on a pedestal. It makes it less relatable, less accessible. It's not wrong to say Chinese tea ceremony. Lots of people use that term. Lots of Chinese people will translate it that way because it makes sense to the Western audience. But really the difference between this and a ceremony is that we're here for the enjoyment. That enjoyment is not shallow. The enjoyment is what's deep about it. But it's not pretentious either.
Yeah.
Wow, it's actually the whiskey settled. And I'm getting a lot of chocolate caramel on the nose now that I was getting a lot of alcohol to begin with.
Oh boy. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, I get that chocolate, caramel,
Ooh,
fudgy,
yeah.
like in the back of the throat, right here. Ooh. So this is 130-ish proof.
Yeah.
Nice.
65%. It's very
65?
strong.
I'm gonna do it.
It has this like mossy kind of component to me that reminds me of that peat smoke impact. Just feels very, I know the alcohol is intense, but it also feels very soft. Like everything is wispy and kind of just like melds together, like staring at something through fog.
Ah, okay. That's an interesting visual. Staring at something through fog.
Yeah, I get it.
I like that.
That's like the kind of notes that we were into, you know what I mean? Those are the kind of...
In tea and just kind of how...
This is water if you want to add some. Yeah, I like adding a drop of water. I like tasting it and then adding a drop of water.
I do too. When I drink whiskey, especially if it's something new to me, I enjoy trying it in different forms. I'll taste it neat and I'll taste it with a little water and on ice. Depending on what it is, I might mix it in a highball or something and just see kind of like how it presents itself in different ways.
Yeah, that's actually something that I did when I first got into whiskey. When we first started working together, I ended up buying the little mini bottles over at the liquor store, and I ended up taking them home, and I would try them the way they came out of the bottle and write down some notes and just trying to get first impressions, not trying to go too deep, like what do I get on the nose, what do I get on the body, and then adding a drop of water or some club soda, and then finally finishing it with some club soda and an ice cube, or try it with ice cube first and then add more club soda. It's like, how do I like this the best? That was my bartending mind.
Gotcha.
Looking at the different spirits. It's like, how does this present itself? Is this better in a cocktail? Is it better as a highball? Am I going to make an old fashioned out of this? Am I going to turn this into a cocktail? Can I ramp up that citrus flavor, or maybe I can highlight the spiciness? And it was a different approach, but there is no, like you said, there is no wrong approach to the way you have a conversation with the spirit or with the tea.
I like that with just a tiny little bit of water. It brings out, I want to say like a grapey thing. And also, it was something I didn't notice until I diluted it, but that was definitely there before, is that it almost reminds me a little bit of like a rye which I like rise a lot, and I know it's not, but I get something in the something about that fudgy, chocolatey back of the throat thing when it's at full strength is rye-like to me when it's diluted.
Yeah,
But
I've
yeah.
had some malted ryes that present that way, that have that
Yeah.
fudgy, malty.
Our rye has a percentage of malted specialty ryes in it, and it does get this like dark chocolate, kind of almost bitter chocolate note to it. I don't know why that trend is there all the time with malt kind of equating to this like chocolatey note with rye for me.
Now the Balcones rye, when I first tried it, it was difficult for me to. But the last time I had Balcones rye, Emma poured some for me over at Balcones, and my perception again changed. So your preconceptions from the first time you try something until the next time you try something, things change. You change.
They do.
Yeah.
In Chinese tea culture, there's actually this term, 一期一会. It actually comes from Japanese tea culture, but it definitely applies, and you see it employed in China all the time. 一期一会 means one time, one meeting. The desire for every bottle from a single run to be the same is kind of an extractive, very like superficial, materialistic desire. Allowing every bottle from even, from beginning to the end, like you were talking about the bottling process and how the whiskey changes. And the allowing that to be the case, allowing the different years to be different, and then allowing different, you drink it today and it's got this note in it, you drink it another day and you can't find that note, and that's okay. It's a different thing today. And same with the tea. It's different this steeping than the last steeping. In fact, you'll never, ever, ever taste this exact steeping ever again. You can make this tea for 20, 50 years, and every day, and you'll still never taste this exact steeping ever again.
Yeah.
With the water, this has gotten sweeter, and it's reminding me of a gift that I got from Emma. This is actually Balcones rum,
Oh,
but they finished it in a peated cask.
so it's gonna have some hogo.
So it's going to have some of that
That's my
funk.
favorite
Favorite word now.
Yeah, I love it. As soon as I learned that, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna just drop that casually into conversation.
Note to self: stop teaching Sohan new words.
I just love the way it sounds. It's just a great word. I really like this with a little bit of water. It's nice. Some whiskeys I like straight, and some whiskeys I like with water. And it's
Actually, when I went to visit Emma at the Balcones distillery, one of our friends, which was here, he was Marshall, and he says, "Oh, do you know they have some dunder over at Balcones?" And I said, "Emma, I heard you have dunder." And she goes, "I have no idea." And she took us down to where they do the brewing, and here they had a couple large containers, and we had to climb up on bags of grain to get in there, and it's like just. Yeah, it's exactly what you expect. It's as dark as molasses. There's this hazy film on top of it that looks like it's starting to turn moldy.
Wait, hold on. What's dunder?
Dunder is basically the leavings after distillation, and they're letting that sit and essentially rot. But that it's like sour mash in whiskey. You take that; it actually helps bring in new flavors, all of those funky esters, that hogo that we were talking about. But it also helps inside of the fermentation control the bacteria level, so that you're not getting a runaway bacteria, and the yeast is able to do its job better.
Wild.
Yeah.
Dunder.
That's funky. There's a very big difference between this rum and the rum we first made.
Yeah.
All the stuff we laid down at the very beginning of making rum at Balcones, we followed a very like whiskey making process to make the rum. I mean,
Right.
they made it the way they made our single malt.
Right.
And the flavor differences, and really just because there wasn't any like real education out there about how to make rum.
Yeah.
Everything was like so tightly held. People didn't really tell their secrets, and
Right.
so
It's all pirates, right?
Yes. You got to watch out for those pirates.
and I think Jared and Zach had met someone, or they went to like a conference and met someone who taught them a lot about making rum, and then they were able to follow up with him and learn more. And that's when the process kind of started tweaking in this direction, and we have this like super funky, weird flavor profile that definitely took me a little bit of time to like.
Yeah, so this has got that hogo that you're talking about, that funk, that banana, pineapple type
All right,
of
all right.
yeah.
I'm trying. Oh boy!
But
yeah.
there's also a rubber hose type of nose on there too.
All right, buddy.
Yeah.
A rubber hose. You're right. It's like someone's shooting a bunch of banana juice out of a rubber hose.
There you go.
Gross visual.
But in a nice way.
In a good way, yeah.
Going, hogo!
Well, just wait until next week. We're going to have another guy who likes to adventure in the rum scene, and he does everything he can to get his ester counts as high as possible. He wants the funkiest, weirdest thing to happen. It's going to be Moose Allen coming in from Andalusia, so he's our next guest.
That'll be a good one.
I'm getting like almost a butterscotchy, like a banana split with butterscotch. And
yes.
and nuts, some kind of nut, pecans or something. Squirted out of a rubber hose. Screaming hogo.
Yep. And
I'm
then
trying to shut my brain off a little bit to talk about the rum the way we talking about tea, where it's more experiential, and I'm having such a hard time. I think because I just have trained myself that anytime I pick up a glass of anything, I'm thinking about what it smells like and what it tastes like, and sometimes that comes out in kind of memories, and it's based in memory.
Right.
But I think by the time it comes out of my mouth, I've translated my memory to like,
Tasting
okay, what will people understand? They're not going to know what my grandmother's garden smelled like, or her banana nut bread, maybe, because she puts, her own seasoning mix in and spices it up. But, they'll know the tasting notes that I list out. So I'm trying, but I am having a hard time.
people come into the tasting room that had no sense of smell. So they were having trouble. It's like, well, it's lost on me. I said, yeah, well, you can tell me. Is it dark? Is it light? Is it thick? Is it thin? Is it hot? Is it warm? Where is it warm? There are different ways to express what it. And there are some people with synesthesia. They talk in colors, and it's like and often when people say that's red, red can be a warm color, but to them it could be an experience that ties to red. It could be a red car racing down the road. It could be fast to them. So red could be a fast color, and that's just how their mind interprets it. So there is no right or wrong.
One of our brewers at Balcones, her name is Erin, and she communicates that way about what she's tasting, but she also does shapes. And so it's like colors and shapes are how she communicates about the whiskey. And I just remember this one time we were talking about a sample, and she was just saying, like, it's triangle. She's like, it's a triangle. And she couldn't, like, that was the only thing popping in her head. She was like, I know that doesn't really tell you anything. And I'm like, but it does.
Yeah.
Like, my guess is it's a rigid whiskey with kind of like sharp edges. It's defined. It's solid. She was like, yes, completely. And so it even shapes and colors still communicates something.
I was watching Daniel and Irene Tan blending in the whiskey vault, and they were talking in triangles. And Daniel was trying to learn the way Irene looks at her blending and the way she comes up with the shapes of her blending, because everybody intuits differently, and that is actually extraordinary. And if you can learn how to speak somebody else's language, you can actually work together better. So it was a collaborative process that was so fun to watch.
That's cool.
And the two of them was like, oh, okay, I get what you're meaning by this. Daniel was talking bass, mids, and trebles, so he's talking in musical terms, but he was able to translate that into this triangle that Irene was working on.
Cool.
So, yeah, it's fun to watch. Be the fly on the wall for how many years now?
Yeah, shapes, colors, memories, images, just straight up visual images, bodily sensations, feeling something in your body, moving in your body, warmth, cold, expansion, floating, sinking, groundedness, all these different things. And that's like what teas, what a tea is there for. That's what the tea plant does, and that's its deal. But it is the same for anything. It's the same for whiskey. It's the same for beer. It's the same for wine. And I think this is kind of, I've probably said this on the show before, but where our discourse with those things, and does tend to lean towards the flavor wheel, the notes, these very like five senses experiences. But what people really might end up gravitating towards a given whiskey for might be a lot more like what we consider the chi, in tea. And it's like, what kind of night are you going to have sharing this bottle with a friend versus sharing this bottle with a friend? You probably would have a different night sharing, even if they're the same proof.
Yeah.
It's not the alcohol. There's something else. There's some other deeper aspect that can be from the plants. It could be from the yeast. It can be from the still. It can be from the barrel. It can be from the blender. And it's also from that person that you're sitting with. And you can't actually go back and relive that same night with a different bottle to see what would happen. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But that spirit is there, there's something in those. And people be like, oh, I can't drink tequila because it makes me go crazy. Like, well, it's not the alcohol, it's something else. It's the spirit of the plant is one way to look at it.
Back to the rum, dark Christmas cake by the fireside.
Yeah, or Bananas Foster. Because that caramely. Is Bananas Foster made with rum?
Bananas Foster is made with rum, yeah.
Well, that would probably explain some of that.
Well, it could also be made with brandy, but
I've
most
never
often.
had Bananas Foster. I use it as an analogy all the time.
Well, we're going to have to take you out. There's a restaurant that I like that does a really good Bananas Foster, and it's not in town. We'd have to go back to Houston. It's Seasons 52, and they do a really good Bananas Foster.
Whew.
Wow. I think that's it for this episode. I think we did a really good job talking about a couple of really interesting spirits here. We've got Pilgrimage from Balcones, and man, that was just so nice and elegant and delicate, and the hints of smoke on that are just so layered and fruity. It's just so pleasant. I love what's coming out of Balcones right now. And what you're doing at Balcones is making me happy too, Emma.
Thank you.
Sohan, West China tea. Today we ended up doing a green tea, and then we've moved into, what was this tea that we...
This is the green tea. This is the sheng pu'er. Yeah, it's an ancient tree sheng pu'er. It's called smoke bomb. It's one of my favorite little nuggets of tea to just grab and drink. We're maybe a little bit screwed because this is a really strong tea and you might be up, and I'm sorry if it's the case. And I didn't want to do it, but that tea, that whiskey, I was like, maybe not, let me smell it, but it was. So that was the one. So if you end up staying up, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Worth it.
Thank you very much again for being here, and we'll go to the next episode.
Cheers.
Cheers.